We're here already. It's about that time when we say welcome to another exciting episode of Zoom Time. My name is Cindy Obey.
And my name is Charlie Boy.
I know right now you'll be wondering who is our guest today. We'll keep that in our hats, even though we don't have any, for just a little while long. So just fasten your seatbelts, get yourself a cold drink. It's about time for another exciting, mind-blowing episode of Zoom Time.
That's right. After you.
Zoom, you zoom, zoom the camera zoom, 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 zoom it down to maximum, zoom, zoom, zoom.
Well, as you might have already guessed, we have a very, very interesting guest this week on Zoom Time. How do we describe him? Well, he is, of course, a retired military officer. He was indeed a past chief of army staff, and he's very, very synonymous with the ECOMOG forces in Liberia and Sierra Leone. We're talking about no less a person than General Victor Malu, right here on Zoom Time. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Let's take you back because there's so much to talk about with you.
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody at home is geared up for this interview. But we want to take you back to the very beginning. Your early life, growing up, family background, how you became who you are today.
Well, I come from a very small village that is difficult to locate on the map. Somewhere in Benue. I went to an elementary school in a place called Sankara from 1955 to 58. And the system then was that you did the junior primary school elsewhere and the senior primary school in another place. So when I completed the junior primary school, I went to the only primary boarding school we had then in TIF division. It's called Vandecare, senior primary school Vandecare. I passed out from there in 1961. By 1962, I was in government college Kasnala. Left the school in 1966 and went to Federal Government College Sokoto in 1967. I had barely finished 1 year in the HSC when the result of the examination into the Nigerian Defense Academy came up, and I passed. So I had to abandon my studies and start my military career. So I joined the Nigerian Defense Academy as a member of the 3rd regular course. That is to say, the only 3rd course since the commencement of the Nigerian Defense Academy. On the 3rd of September 1967. Because I was doing the regular combatant course for an officer, I spent the next 3 years there until I was commissioned on the 14th of March 1970, just about a week or so after the Nigerian Civil War.
Oh, so you didn't really take part in this?
No, I didn't.
So let's take you back, to the beginning as a kid. What do you remember most? What's your fondest memory as a teenager, growing up?
I didn't spend much of my youthful days with my parents.
Why?
In those days, I think it was fashionable to send you to live with some other person that could discipline and straighten you as a child. I was sent to stay with...
An uncle?
Not exactly an uncle, but somebody from the same clan, a very rich man who had so many wives and so many children.
Wow.
In fact, one of the biggest families that you could ever come across. So I stayed with him for the whole duration of my primary school. And again, in those days, my school was about 5 kilometers from our house through a bush path. And I was the smallest in the group. So they used to make me lead the way to clear the dew. So I could pass without any problems. And I think that helped to toughen me because I used to run faster than all of them. I run underneath the bush, leave the dew there, I get to school earlier. By the time they got there, they were always all cited for lateness. I was getting punished.
Yeah. So what kind of a teenager did that make you? I mean, growing up, would you say you were rascally? Would you say you were bookworm?
No. I wasn't rascally, I wasn't bookworm, but I was a very determined kid. Maybe because I didn't grow with my father and mother to get those luxuries that spoil a child, I had to struggle in everything to make a good name. I was particularly good on sports, so I was every teacher's favorite.
What kind of sports?
Oh, I done every sport, almost to the highest level. I was a captain in every school I attended, including the HSC in Sokoto. Not only in football, I played cricket for the northern team when I was still in secondary form 3. I played hockey for the national team. What else did I do? I played tennis for the Nigerian Army. That's the last one that I still do now, but very barely. I hardly have time to do it, but I think I've done sports. I've done almost every sport that I've decided to take part in to a very high level.
Now, talking about the military, what really, from your background, prepared you to join the military? I mean, it must have been a conscious effort, decision to take the form or the exams.
If you go to my area, I come from a place that almost to the core, that was the only place we could get employment. Let me put it that crudely. You know, in the 60s, if you go cast your mind back, there were a lot of problems in Thief Division. The thieves were fighting with the Sadona of Sokoto, trying to assess our independence. So when you remember the name J.S. Taka, maybe you, yes. So the only places where we could get employment was actually to go into the army. And I think by some stroke or chance, the people there, they like the profession. I think they like hardship. But as a person, what actually encouraged me to go into the army was the sort of discipline that one observed. In those days, soldiers used to go on long route march with the British. And if you were lucky for them to camp near your area, you had an opportunity of observing soldiers at a close range. They came in the night, they billeted. That is, they set up their tents and arrange everything. By 5 a.m., you get to the place. The only way you know that anybody stayed in that place was that the grass would have been disturbed. Otherwise, you would not see a single piece of paper on the ground. Everything was either buried or carried away. Even those that came on leave, if you saw a soldier walking in the marketplace, without anybody telling you, know this must be a soldier. The way they comported themselves with respect and the way they accorded people their respect. You know, all those things, I made up my mind at a very early age that this is the profession I want to go in. In fact, in my secondary school, even before I went to the HSC, they used to call me brigadiers for some reasons, because I was very militant.
It was a premonition.
I like leading people. By example, by coercion, but I like leading people. And I thought the army was the best thing for me to do. I never even knew that I would go into the army to make the officer grade and become what I eventually became.
When did you, at what time, what age did you now start to say to yourself, okay, maybe this is where I should go? Is it after secondary?
No, in my secondary school years. I was to go to the university, but I knew that my choice would be army. In fact, when I took permission from my principal in the government college, a federal government college, Sokoto, to go and write the NDA exam, he was very reluctant to grant it. But I told him I had filled the form and I wanted to take a chance. I think he allowed me because I gave them the impression that I didn't even have a chance. I know he valued me not just as a student, but because I was the captain, the football captain, and I used to do almost every other sport for the school. So I had a lot of following in the school. People used to look very much up to me.
Now, before you, sorry to cut in here, before you took that decision, right, was there an event that happened, you know, as a teenager that informed her, okay, well, the army should be
Yes.
the place how to be?
The crisis in Thief Division, first of all, brought in the normal regular police, the Thief Native Authority police. And I think it was because of the large number of ex-servicemen, people who had gone to World War I, World War II. They were able to defeat these people so badly that the government of northern state had to send the mobile police, who came and suffered even a worse fate, until the army came in. And the army came in and showed their neutrality despite all their aggressiveness.
What year was this?
I think between 1964 and, between 1959 and 62.
Would you say the army is still as disciplined as they were in those days? We'll use the OD crisis as a...
The army is very disciplined. At times you have poor leadership that makes things go bad. You cannot blame it on the soldier.
So the incursion into politics has not affected...
The incursion into the politics affected the officer mentality. Soldiers don't take part in coup. They do what they are told. So the officer cadre is what suffered because of our involvement in politics, not the soldier.
We'll come to that portion of the interview. Now, so what was the primary reason you now had to get into the army, and what were your objectives? What objectives did you set for yourself as you were going into the army?
I wanted to be a captain in the Nigerian army. I just liked the rank because 3 peeps in a row was something that looked so fanciful. I thought that was the highest I was going to the army. As a matter of fact, I didn't know there was anything higher than that until I actually went to become a cadet, then started knowing about the military service, what it entailed, how far I could go. And I looked at it and said, well, I think I have a good profession to follow.
I noticed you speak with some kind of accent. Where is that coming from?
There's no accent. That's how Tea people speak.
Really?
When I was in Liberia, they used to offend me a lot, telling me that I speak like a Ghanaian. And then the Ghanaian will say I speak like a Liberian. I'll take a lot of offense. I say it's because they haven't been to my place. That's how we speak with a lot of... In fact, if we go to a tea village, typical tea village, I hear the way they speak, you wonder whether we are from another...
Interesting. So, what was life as a military cadet?
That is the toughest life you can ever go about, and the best life for anybody that chooses the military as a career.
At any time as a cadet, did you say to yourself, oh, maybe I should have chosen?
So many times.
Why didn't you?
I was punished more than anybody I could think about.
So that means you're a mischievous...
Yes, as for that, I agree. I think at times, out of challenge, we used to break the law to see whether we could escape. I remember on about 2 occasions, I couldn't go on leave because I had punishment to serve. I went to a nightclub with some of my colleagues, and one of our Indian officers saw us. In fact, it was a very serious offense. When we were charged and marched before the commandant, our senior, who was also there, denied being there. And we were told that a cadet doesn't lie. So I went before the commandant, stood at attention and told him, yes, I went out. But I thought that was the most decent place for an officer cadet to go to. That was not long after they opened Hamdallah Hotel. They used to have a place called Rooftop Garden, where one of these local bands used to perform. I had a punishment, it was supposed to be 21 days confinement. But anytime you came on the parade and they inspected and found anything wanting, they'll add more days. So I ended up having about 65 days. So I spent my leave doing my punishment where every other person was on leave.
And what was the most memorable time in the army?
Memorable time?
During your cadet days?
Cadet days.
My cadet days, I remember every day of it. In fact, when we meet ourselves, members of that course, and I think because we suffered more than anybody else, we have developed into something like a family. In fact, when we meet and talk about things that we did, you think this is something one did last week. You wouldn't know it's something that we're talking of 35 years ago, because it was really memorable. When you suffer collectively in a group, like we did, we had a regular 2 that was the next course that we met when we went to the NDA. The first course had already passed out and they were fighting in the Nigerian Civil War. So we met only the second course. Unfortunately, there were very few. Because of the Civil War, officers, the Igbo extraction had left. So I think there were about 14 people and we were about 36. And these people saw to it that they punished us to hell. We didn't know that it was a way of building up a person. We hated them very much. Now they are the people I respect more than anybody else. Some of them retired as lieutenant majors. When I see them, I stay at attention to give them their compliment because I attribute my success to their upbringing. And that is the peculiar thing about the military. In other sectors, you look at somebody, why was this person doing this to me? He becomes your enemy for life. Those are the people who almost worship because they turned us into what a military officer should be. We could run through fire. If I tell you things we will do, you will not believe.
Share some of them with us.
There is something you call fire alarm. If you're on a story building and the alarm sounds, wherever you are supposed to get there within a few seconds. We learned how to jump to the ground, roll over, and get to the place of where the alarm was sounded. If we saw cadets do this, you would never believe. It was like magic. And we were so proud of it. And then again, because we were very few, we had the opportunity of proper rounded military training. I could ride a horse, wrestle on the horse without holding anything. All those were compulsorily taught to us. Everyone had to learn how to box. As part of your military training, you must know how to swim as part of your military training. All those things, with time and with the growth of the institution, it was impossible.
Which of your training officers made the most impact on you as a person?
There are very many, but mainly at the cadet level, they were mainly Indian officers. If you remember in those days, it was the Indian team. Eventually, we had people like General Lekot, one of the toughest officers that I ever served, and one of the officers I respect today. He was my adjutant, and he punished me to death. The day before our commission, that is to become officers, he gave me a punishment. At a point, I just told him, look, I don't want to be an officer any longer. Just kick me out of the NDA. That word alone cost me a lot because he made me to redo the whole punishment, including what I had already done. And I was
what specific punishments were given to you?
There is something you call frog jump. You hold a rifle over your head on a parade ground. If you see how a parade ground is made, it's not just concrete. It's concrete with chips on it. Now to do a frog jump from one end to the other, by the time you do 20 meters, you know what it is.
The first time you went abroad,
yes,
to attend the course, what did it feel like?
Oh, it was difficult. I went to Salisbury. They call it the infantry center of the British Army. I believe you must have been there to see the type of weather in that place. If you stand up and the wind is blowing, it will move you. And here was an African in winter, standing with just ordinary gloves on my hand. And I had to take notes while the lecture was going on. I never knew I was going to come back alive. But
it was that bad.
You develop and start liking the place. Because you see other people either younger than you or smaller in stature than you doing it, and you start questioning yourself, If they can do it, why not me?
So, now, how long did you spend there? And then when you came back, what happened? Did you get a promotion?
Yeah, no, before I went there, by the time I went for my first course, I had done many other courses within the country, mainly in our military training center then in Kaduna. But besides that, I had commanded so many units and gained a lot of experience. Like I was telling you from the beginning, we were commissioned on the 14th of March, 1970. And my first place to report was in Agbo. The late General Yaradua, who was then a major, was our brigade commander. One of the finest officers who unfortunately dabbled into other things and became the Chief of Staff Supreme Headquarters. He was one officer that anyone military officer would have liked to serve with, because he was not just like a commander, he was your father, he was everything. As an officer in that brigade, if you were going to marry, you must go and take permission from General Yaradua.
No paper. Really?
You write and apply that you want to marry. Tell him who your wife is, what is her background. And then only when he approves of it that you marry. If you wanted to buy a car, you must have to go and tell him the type of car, how and where you are going to get money to maintain it, and live like an officer. And when he approved it, he didn't just say, yes, go ahead. He will pay more than half the cost of that car. So we were like one big family. I thought there was no life anywhere else like the army. Those are things I remember, and I still feel very proud of what the army was. And it was not only himself.
Did you say was?
Well, he's dead now.
No, what the army was at the time.
Yeah, what the army was, you can't compare it to what obtains now. Those are the consequences of our dabbling into politics or into running of the country, because a lot started going bad, not with the first regime or the second regime. The subsequent coup d'etat that came in were done for very selfish reasons. Very, very selfish reasons. And because those people didn't have any justifiable reason to overthrow the next person, they had to use a lot of irregular things to do. And that's where the army started deteriorating, where officers of junior rank started taking decisions over their bosses, even determining whether they should continue in service. That was the point at which I started regretting what the hell brought me into this profession.
As an officer of the army yourself, have you ever been involved in a coup?
I could have never been involved in a coup. As a matter of fact, I got punished because I opposed the coup.
Which one is specific?
I was the brigade commander in Port Harcourt when General Buhari was overthrown. And my GOC in Enugu instructed me to make a broadcast to support the government. And I told him nobody consulted me. I didn't know the reason why the government was overthrown. To the best of my knowledge, that man was doing an excellent job. So since you are very convinced that it was the right thing he did, make the broadcast from Enugu. You are the GOC. Within 6 months, I went on about 10 postings. And I'll tell you, I went from Port Harcourt to Sokoto. I was there for 3 months, from Sokoto to Zaria, 2 months, Zaria to Kaduna, 2 months, Kaduna to Jos. And I think somebody thought they would do that and frustrate me so I would change from what I am. You don't change an adult unless the man is mentally retarded. So I could have never taken part in a coup. And that's the dilemma officers suffered. Because when your commander-in-chief or whoever eventually becomes the head of state speaks, he's speaking for every one of you. And you cannot go out and say, no, I was not a party to that decision. Those were the things that frustrated some officers and got some to leave the service or some to degenerate into something else.
Now, as a soldier, apart from your training, during your training, Have you ever fired a rifle at somebody? Have you ever killed?
Not only fired a rifle, I've carried a rifle and led troops to go and kill.
Have you killed?
Of course. I wasn't in the army as a welfare officer. In any case, when I actually went out to fight, it was because we had a choice of either surrendering ourselves to be taken prisoners of war.
Where was it?
That was in Liberia in 1993.
Now, we must move there now, because I realized that was when your name, first of all, became very prominent.
That is one of the funny things about this country. I went to Liberia for the first time, 92, June. My tour of duty was supposed to be only 6 months, because we used to rotate the troops then every 6 months. In fact, let me start from the beginning. When the War College, Nigeria decided to have its own War College, a few of us from the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, all of the rank of brigadier generals, were sent on course. We did a joint course with the British officers that were to come and open the college. So we came back together with the British team. You know, the excitement of being an instructor in the highest military institution, I brought a lot of things to come and make my office look like somebody in such an institution. Finished my office, and we were waiting for the opening of the course. I went on the weekend to Makurdi, came back, and I was told I was posted to Liberia. And it was rather strange, because we were very few that were sent on this attachment, and the intention was for us to work with the British team. So if you had planned that I should go to Liberia, why did you send me on the attachment? General Seni was then my commandant, so I went to tell him that I'm going to Liberia. And he showed a lot of surprise why I should be posted to Liberia. He wanted to go and see General Abacha so that they could stop my posting. I pleaded with him. I said, sir, I know the Nigerian army very well. If I don't go on this posting, the next thing against me will be that I was afraid to go for an operational posting. I went and wiggled my way out. Please do me a favor. Reserve my office for me. I'm only going for 6 months. I'll come back to the War College to come and teach, because of the pride I had in that institution.
Who signed your letter of posting?
The military secretary then, General Shagaya.
So the order came. The order came from the president.
The order was from the chief of army staff. No, it was General Salih Ibrahim. He never liked me till today. You know, this is the thing about the army. Some of us had the not guts, but because we have not learned anything, we've been brought up by the army. The army tells you that you should tell the truth in whatever situation. That will probably explain to you why I convicted somebody whom I personally sentenced to be executed and went to plead that they should release him and allow him to come back to service. That is, I'm talking in case of Major Fadikwe, because he proved himself to be an officer in the true definition of an officer of an army.
Is he still in the army now?
Because they didn't bring him back. Abubakar didn't act on it. Obasanjo came in, nothing has happened, so there's no need wasting anybody's listening.
Now, getting back to the posting, you now proceeded to...
I went to Liberia, and I took over from the then Chief of Staff of the ECOMOG, but I was supposed to understudy him for 2 weeks before he will actually hand over to me, and I'll take over as a full Chief of Staff, because you need to know the country. You need to know the environment, the deployment of the soldiers, and so on. I was in that state when Prince Johnson, if you remember him, in fact, he's here with us in Nigeria. Those are the type of stupid things we do, and we cannot explain to anybody except that we are Nigerians. He came, he wanted to take over Monrovia by force. He used to be on a place called Cardwell Base, which was like a separate country where he was practicing his laws and so on. He was above the laws of the government of Liberia, killing people every day and doing all sorts of things. So he wanted to organize a very, very violent demonstration, which would have probably gotten Dr. Sawyer killed. Well, I had not taken over, but I was still in Liberia, and I was the incoming chief of staff. So I conferred with my colleague that I was taking over from. I said, this is not a situation we can accept. To come from Cardwell into Monrovia, there's a bridge, which is the bottleneck. And considering the number of people that were with him on arms, and considering the strength of the ECOMOG in Monrovia, the only place we could hold him was on that bridge. And in those days, other than the Guineans that had some tanks, these old T-55 tanks, the rest of us, especially from Nigeria, all we had was your rifle and 2 magazines. So we had to call up the Guineans to come and deploy the tanks, and we challenged and dared him to cross the bridge that would destroy everybody. I had not taken over officially. We were there shouting at each other nose to nose until he saw that we actually meant what we wanted, that what we told him we were going to do. So he withdrew. So by the time I took over from General Mbe as the chief of staff, I had 2 enemies. Prince Johnson wouldn't even acknowledge letters written by me. And I was the only person who could write and sign letters on behalf of the ECOMOG because I was the chief of staff. He said I was only a brigadier, he was a field marshal, that he could barely accept letters coming from General Bakut because he was a major general, and that since there was nobody above him. So we became enemies right from that point. So that complicated my job a lot. But it was much, much later on October 15, 1993, when Charles Taylor, 1992, when Charles Taylor organized what is very famous now, Operation Octopus, when he surrounded the ECOMOG with over 15,000 men, and we're only 3,500. I'm going to explain to you why I had to go and kill, and proudly too. So we're now in a position of either giving up and surrendering to the rebels or fighting to stay alive. The only place we could maneuver was from the ECOMOG base. Have you been to Liberia?
No.
When you sit in the ECOMOG base, if you look back, less than 200 meters is the Atlantic Ocean. So the question of saying you are running to anywhere is not there, unless you can swim across an ocean. And in any case, we didn't even have boats. So the question of escaping was not there. We had to fight. And if you want to fight safely from a professional point of view, you go aggressive and push the other man. Don't let him be the one pushing you. This was at a point at which, as a brigadier general in the army, I used to carry my rifle. And once they saw me as a very senior officer going out, cooks, stewards, tapis, everybody will be encouraged. If the general can do this, we can. Then they'll follow me behind. And my fear used to be that they should not shoot me from the back. We keep praying, because it wasn't from the enemy this time. Your threat was from those soldiers that were following you. So I did that several times.
So how did you get out of that situation?
Well, the response from the then head of state was very good. We told them the situation we were in, that if they did not reinforce us quickly, we were all going to either die fighting or become prisoners of war or whatever. So we were authorized. By this time, we had already got a battalion in Sierra Leone, which was helping the Sierra Leoneans with their security and also training their army. We were given a go-ahead to fly them to Monrovia immediately. And they sent the Charlie 130s, they brought them. And then we started getting a lot of reinforcement coming from Nigeria.
Now, in your second coming, towards the end, there was this news making the round, rumors in the papers.
Yes.
About the Nigerian soldiers, you know, who were supposed to be like a peacekeeping stuff, were involved with in a lot of looting and a lot of carrying on.
There were, no, not towards the end of the operations. At a particular point in the ECOMOG, the morale of the troops was so low that they could do anything, because nobody was giving attention to them. that was before I went. I took over at a very critical time when the Liberian factions had fought themselves to a standstill. Then I came in. And I came in with a wealth of knowledge, knowing that I had fought in that place for 1 year. I can close my eyes and draw Liberia and tell you where every small town is. Out of respect to my predecessor who was handing over to me, the late General Nenge, we are, by the way, from the same place. I sat attentively and waited for his briefing. He was in Liberia for a long time, but I think because he was there in a relatively peacetime, he didn't know Liberia as much as I did. So I respected him, took notes and so on. I waited for him to leave. Then I unfolded my own program, or where we stopped when I was serving as the Chief of Staff to General Luring. And people thought I was crazy. Even Charles Taylor himself. I made a statement here in Nigeria that when I was being interviewed by the press on what I thought I would do differently in Liberia if I went there, I told them, well, to the best of my knowledge, the only recognized security apparatus in that country is ECOMOG. And I'm not going to share that responsibility with anybody. So if you have your militia, keep it in your bag. Until ECOMOG leaves, then you can take it out. So when we went, we started embarking on cordon and search. And we started with Charles Taylor, of all people. I remember he called me when his place was raided, thoroughly searched, and we recovered a lot of arms. He said, General Malu, I might not like you, but I respect you. I heard the statement you made in your country about coming to take charge of security here. And of all the people here, you started with me. I said, Your Excellency, I have a responsibility to keep you alive. I want to be the person to take responsibility at who is firing at you or me. I want to be able to answer to the ECOWAS authorities that we are in charge of security. And it's for that reason that I'm not sparing anybody. So in your interest, tell your boy General Malu is back. We fought here to kill you. Very likely you escaped. Now it's a different time. We are come for peace. And that peace, we are going to bring it to this place. And we went location by location, especially the areas that the various head of the militias were. Dr. Boley, Roosevelt Johnson, Masakwe, you know. So we raided like that and we recovered a large quantity of arms. And an incident took place that gave the Liberians confidence in the ECOMOG again. I'm coming to answer your question. You were talking about looting. Within 3 weeks of my reporting to Liberia, there was an attempt to assassinate Charles Taylor in the executive mansion. The normal thing is, if the ECOMOG didn't react very forcefully, that would have been the day that the whole of Monrovia would have been destroyed. Because Charles Taylor's people that were on arms alone were how many hundreds over our own strength. But what we had achieved at this time was that we had a lot of logistic support, particularly from the American government, the Dutch, the German, and to some extent the British. So we were able to deploy troops to keep the whole of Monrovia at a standstill. We were deploying by boats, we were deploying by helicopters, we were deploying by road, and every means. And within a matter of 2 hours, we brought Monrovia to a standstill. So nobody had any opportunity of going to where they had their rifles buried to come back and start causing this in. That was the first incident. If you see what papers wrote about me in Liberia, now they recognize that ECOMOG is not dead. And then my name, I used to be very popular there, maybe in those days. Started talking about General Malu. I almost became like, I used to tell them they're spoiling me. In my country, I'm just an infantry officer. They are making me to feel an important person. Maybe I'll go back and start behaving that way and get myself into trouble.
So the looting,
So the looting thing took place, but that is one of the things, one of the questions I answered that the Western press took delight in quoting me every time. Here you have troops from 10 West African countries, some English speaking, some French speaking. I expect the standard of discipline to be the same. If in such an environment where you have troops with different backgrounds, different training levels, different ideologies, different doctrines, you are bound to have things like that. But you only hold that responsible if a case was reported and we did not treat it. I was harder on soldiers than anybody else. I remember how many times I carried soldiers in my boot. I'll drive in my short, in a plain vision, parked at a checkpoint. Then I see a soldier collecting this in. I'll move there, tell you this is General Malu. I open my boot, go in. I'll take you in. I didn't know these people were observing me. It was when they wrote the article about me. I said, so what I'm doing here is not a secret. And we're able to check and stop to the admiration of everybody, not only Liberians.
Now, how much did all that, stay, the ECOMOG thing, trying to maintain peace in Liberia, because a lot of our money was sunk into all of that. Well, and then you are mentioning America, the British people.
I'll tell you the truth. People came into government and Abacha was already unpopular. So everything associated with his name was made to be as unpopular as possible. That is the problem this government is having right now. You beat the finger because you want to so criticize the establishment of ECOMOG, especially the good services we provided in Liberia. Now they are in a dilemma on how to send troops to that country. Nigeria couldn't have spent the 12 or 14 billion dollars that people are talking about, or is to give that regime a bad name. And I'm in the position to say this categorically.
You mean we didn't spend as much money?
Let me start with our allowances. As a general in the army, from 1992 when I went in, my allowance was $5. My allowance per diem, that is what we paid on daily basis. I was taking $5 like my cook, my orderly, my steward, my driver, my ADC. That was an allowance that was across board to all the troops. Irrespective of whatever number we had in Liberia, our allowances at any one time didn't get to 2 million. All the other things...
Naira or dollars?
Dollars, US dollars. Every other thing was coming from Nigeria. In fact, when we were desperately looking for ammunition to fight, they were flying bread, onion, and eggs to us in a Charlie 130. The fueling of a Charlie 130 could buy 10 times the cost of everything they brought to us. The ammunition was collected from the Army ordnance. That is for the Army. And I know the one from the Navy was collected from the Navy ordnance. The one from the Air Force that the Alpha J's were using, it was from ammunition that were bought and paid for in Paris, which had been there for how many years, that somebody remembered and they started sending out those ammunition. So nobody paid anything to procure anything specifically for ECOMOG. The thing that Nigeria spent money, to the best of my knowledge, food was procured and sent to us. During Babagida's time, it was the office of Admiral Ikomo as the vice president that was arranging food. And food used to come in a ship, and you could quantify and know how much that the whole of the food was. Then fuel was sent, supplied by NNPC. It used to be about once in 4 months. And that was the fuel that all the contingents, Nigerians, Ghanaians, Gambians, Sierra Leoneans, Guineans, everybody on the ECOMOG, that was the fuel that was used for their movement. And Liberia is a very small country. We had a very limited area over which we could move. Charles Taylor was controlling most of the places. It was only after we had carried out the disarmament that we started traversing all those long distances, opening the roads and so on for the humanitarian agencies and NGOs to start distributing food and for the politicians to start their campaign. So when people are mentioning these monies, they are mentioning it because they want to give that regime a very bad name. But I'll tell you honestly, what we did in Liberia is what put Nigeria on the map. Is what put Nigeria, as much as The Americans and the West hated Abacha. They admired him for that fact. And one doing it for them. In the ECOWAS sub-region, Nigeria's population is more than the remaining members put together. So you know the consequences of any instability in any of these countries. By God's grace or by stroke of chance, we are made to take the leadership because of our number. There's no other armed forces within the sub-region that can send a brigade anywhere.
So what you're saying is that General Abacha was justified to invest.
It was not even
the
ECOMOG. It was Babangida. It was a humanitarian gesture, which, despite the fact that we lost a lot of people, we are respected because of the way we help that country. I'll tell you, I've gone to how many countries to present papers because they want to share our experiences. I've been to Germany about 3 times. I've been to South Africa. By the time I finish presenting the papers, that's when they know the truth is here and they stand up to give us a standing applause for what we did.
But there's also the argument, General, that you are a professional soldier, but a lot of people might have hijacked the ECOMOG funding in ways of siphoning.
That's the exact point I'm making. That's the exact point I'm making. If money was spent, it was spent here in Nigeria. And that's where they should concentrate. Because having operated at that level, I should have known if we were getting anything extra. We didn't. As a matter of fact, our success in Liberia is because of the American decision to come out openly and support us. We had about 5 helicopters. One of the biggest helicopters you've ever seen in your life, the M23, that carries almost 500 soldiers. They are Russian, they were chartered by the Americans and made available to us.
Now let's move on. You sound like a very stubborn.
No, not stubborn. Brutally frank. That's what the Minister of Defense told me when I was retiring.
Did that ever get you into trouble?
A lot of times. I was telling you about Malu Ibrahim. You know, in this country, for some reason at times, people want people who will come and tell them, say, you are very good, you have done this. I'm not used to that, unfortunately. I never came from a place where you go and tell somebody that he has done well when he knows he has not. If you ask my opinion, I'll tell you, you have not done anything. You are a total failure. And if you want, I'll tell you why you are a failure. Many people don't take a lot of exception to that. I like people to tell me that. And explain to me where I've gone wrong, I'll correct myself. And especially in my profession, that's how it's supposed to be.
Now, Tunde, was that a gas or what? And if people out there think that they've heard it all, they should just wait for next week, no?
Yeah, it's mind-boggling what we discussed, you know. But that's all we can take for this week.
Yeah.
So you got to stay tuned. Same time next week for the concluding part of that interview with General Victor Malu right here on Zoom Time.
That's right.
Zoom Time bridges the gap between the leaders and the followers in Nigeria and beyond. Zoom Time offers the leaders, captains of industries, the movers and the shakers the opportunity to highlight their achievements so far. So be a part of Zoom Time phenomenon and write to the producers, number 2 Ajiligan Street, Bagara, Lagos, or call 080